the woke crowd is the most self-righteous, element there is. That said, it's often alleged that, Christians are self-righteous, or that somehow that self-righteousness is a product of religious, specifically Christian belief.
But I've noticed, like, when people express, and it tends to be Christians rather than just average people, and Lizzie is a Christian, but she doesn't do this at all. Someone will say, I've seen what's going on, I really with you, I'm praying for you, I really care about you. Then there's a middle sentence which says, I really feel for you, but if only you were a better person every day of the week, it wouldn't happen to you. Welcome to another episode of WTF, which doesn't stand for what has happened to Lawrence's hair. Just because I'm doing a Larry Taunton impression with my hair doesn't mean that he is my hero. It's been a while because Larry decided to selfishly go to Europe and almost get sort of mullered several times, and then got mullered when he got back. But we're here again to discuss the world, and it's good to see you all. And how are you, Sir Larry?
It's good to see you. And just for the record, I had about a foot of my hair cut off just a few days by our favorite, beautician. And so, you can't say your hair is longer than mine, I think, right now.
I'm coming to see your favorite beautician as soon as possible because it's getting out of hand now. I feel like Tony Blair during lockdown. I look like a leftist politician during lockdown.
I actually think it looks good. I think
it's
you look
ginge.
Starting to look like, a Detective Hathaway again.
Did he have a long hair series? He might have done.
Not necessarily long hair, but longer than you keep it these days. Now, he didn't have the glasses, and he was always clean shaven. There you go. There he is. That's that guy.
That's the guy. I knew he was there somewhere. I was clean shaven. Yeah, I haven't done that for many years. Maybe I should do that. I did mention that to my son the other day. I said, maybe I'll shave. And he went, please don't. And I was like, okay, all right, that's that done.
Did you ever play a character who was supposed to be, kind of rough looking and
a few
unkempt?
Yeah. A few, I think. Yeah, it's. I think I did play. Who did I play? Yeah, I played. My final character was a bit rough and unkempt. Yeah, I can't really remember anymore. It feels like a eon ago, but there we are.
This is completely in left field, as we would say here. But is there anybody living today that if you could play them in a movie, would you?
Well, you suggested I play Christopher Hitchens, which I quite
You'd
like
be brilliant.
Who living today? No, but I've started to think that all of the people that we were taught in history class were evil. And I mean, this obviously doesn't apply to people like Adolf and stuff like that, but all the people we were told in Britain who were like really dreadful people, I've started to watch some of them and what they said. And I've gone, I completely agree with you. And the worrying one that really got me this morning was Oswald Mosley. So Oswald Mosley said this morning, well, he didn't say it this morning, he said it years ago. He said that he sort of said what I slightly think was that we involved ourselves in a war between Russia and Germany, and that the British people's revenge on us was for the fact that we involved ourselves and sent 20 odd million Europeans to their deaths to fight communism. Whereas there's a big, strong strain of communism in Britain, which Oswald Mosley wanted to get rid of. I know nothing more about Oswald Mosley than that, but I thought, yeah, I slightly agree with that. So maybe Oswald Mosley in a biopic. Netflix? Hello? Enoch Powell? Netflix?
What if you were asked to play Trump? You think you could pull it off? I mean, you look nothing like him, but there are plenty of people who don't look like, one of my favorite movies actually is Tom Selleck playing Eisenhower. And when I saw that he was playing that, I thought, no way, he's way too tall, looks nothing like him, won't work. And he was brilliant in the role. You think you could practice being Donald Trump and you could pull it off?
I can do the lips. I haven't quite worked out the accent, but I can do the lips and the hands. It's beautiful. It's magnificent. I could probably work it out. I'm not too bad at accents. I'd love to play Trump. I pick up. I'm quite lucky in the fact that I can pick up, if I bother to investigate things, I can pick up people's mannerisms and ways of speaking and stuff like that.
Let's see your Jordan Peterson again.
The thing is about love, life. It's so real. And you gotta feel it. Because if you don't feel it, it's not real. And we need to know, all of us together. It's that. I love Jordan. I know you've got a bit of a thing with Jordan, and he's had a bad week, hasn't he? But
well, listen, I don't dislike him as a human being.
No, I know this is a problem. Sorry to start swearing early on. I've just been listening to an hour and a quarter of a man called Charlie Munger. He was an economist, and he did a speech called the 24. I mean, I cannot recommend it more highly to everybody, to their children. The Psychology of Human Mismanagement. It was delivered, I think it was delivered in 1995, but I might be wrong. It might have been delivered long before that. And it is absolutely, look, the last thing I looked at was Oxford comma. Wonder why that was, Larry? So I was listening to Charlie Munger talking about that. And sorry, why was I saying that? What was the point?
We were talking about Jordan Peterson, and I said, I don't dislike him personally.
Yes, yeah. So he tries to rationalize the human existence. That's what he does, and he's brilliant at it. The guy was hugely successful human being, and he managed to pretty much rationalize everything that human beings do and the human condition beautifully in these 24 points about why we're all so stupid. And he just misses out the one really important one, which is God. I've been sort of debating this afternoon with the person that sent it to me and saying it's this thorough examination of the human condition in the absence of a creator that I've ever heard. And I thought it was wonderful. And I thought maybe that was relevant to Jordan because of this somehow difficult thing that he has to jump over the final hurdle that brings all of the hurdles together and makes the rationalization of it all less crucial. Do you know what I mean? That sort of desire that we all have it, this desire for power over our own feelings, knowledge, understanding, and everything. But to abrogate oneself of it whilst being aware of it is much better than to say I am in total control over my own. I am the master of my fate and all of that stuff. You're not, ultimately. And I thought that Jordan had a bad week because he was brutally chastised on Joe Rogan. You commented on it, other people commented on it, and I thought he was basically trying to make a pretty spiritual point, which is everyone's a bit of and he sort of tried to make it. Well, yeah, I know, but that's sort of what I felt he was trying to say. And
I didn't disagree with his point.
Yeah, what did you disagree with?
I didn't disagree with his point.
Hang on, let's play his point.
You also set that conversation up, but it poked up and made itself manifest in that conversation. And the issue is, how do you identify the psychopathic pretenders? And it's even worse now, and then make a barrier, right? Now, the right was calling for the left to do that for decades, and they didn't, and they couldn't. And the left is not good at drawing barriers, partly temperamentally. The right is somewhat better, but there's no shortage of monstrosity there. And so then the question is, how do you draw the line? And that's kind of what I was, because I've been watching these right-wing, they're not right-wing, these psychopathic types manipulate the edge of the conservative movement for their own gain. And a lot of that's cloaked in anti-Semitic guise. There's plenty of anti-Semitism on the left too, by the way. So it's not unique to the right.
Well, but particularly now.
Yes, particularly now.
Right.
And so, you've let your curiosity guide you, your curiosity and your desire for knowledge, this quest, you've let that guide you as a podcaster. And by the way, I'm trying to work through exactly the same sort of thing. How do you know, given your radical increase in stature over the last 10 years, how do you know when your curiosity and even your skepticism about the fact that things aren't the way that people say they are, because that's certainly been demonstrated in the last 10 years, how should anyone decide what guardrails to put up? Like, what do you look for? Do you have a conceptual system worked out for that? Like,
And
because
what
That right there. I didn't disagree with his point per se. It is rather that Rogan, if we're talking about the same clip, Rogan is they're talking about, conservatism and so-called alt-right and this kind of stuff. And here was Peterson sort of talking as the kind of arbiter of what conservatism is or isn't. And I thought, but Jordan, you're part of the problem. In fact, that's what I tweeted. You're part of the problem because you're not a conservative and you don't understand what conservatism is. He's anti-woke. I keep saying this over and over again to people, drive it home to them. Being anti-woke is not the same thing as being a conservative. Now, being a conservative means you are anti-woke, but Muslims are anti-woke and they're not conservatives. So authentic conservatism is rooted in, is based on the 10 Commandments, a Judeo-Christian worldview. It grows out of that worldview. And there are a lot of other people who kind of sort of attach themselves to certain aspects of it, like, say, Elon Musk or Donald Trump to some extent, or some others. And they're what I would call sort of traditionalists. There's something changing in the world and that they don't like, and they can't put their finger on it, but they do know that they're anti-woke. That much they get. But Peterson is a postmodern, actually. He's quite postmodern in his thinking, which is to say somewhat new age. And hence the reason that he sort of, when he's talking about God, is when it really comes out, is because Peterson is critiquing or explaining or discussing a God of his own making. It's not one that bears any resemblance to the God of the Bible. And so I keep trying to push Jordan, either commit, either become a Christian, commit, or go back into your lane where you're an excellent critic of wokedom and you're offering, just sensible, basic advice to young men. But before he had his discussion with Richard Dawkins, I told both him and Richard, you will demolish him because he doesn't actually believe this. And I told Peterson, don't debate Dawkins, because I'm going to tell you what's going to happen here. Because you don't believe this, he is going to expose you as a fraud as it relates to this topic. I don't mean Peterson as a person as a fraud, but I mean when it comes to his God talk, which really isn't even theological. God talk. It's just God talk. It's not theology. It's not rooted in, an actual scripture and deep thought. Richard is going to expose you as somebody who doesn't actually believe it. And that's what happened. Dawkins demolished him in that discussion, embarrassed Peterson in that discussion.
In a very simple way.
It doesn't seem like he learned anything from it.
In a very simple way, he did it as well. Yeah. So he said,
"Do you believe the resurrection?"
Yeah, it's like the simplest thing. And the strange part is that Peterson didn't just say yes. I'm
not sure. My Peterson is. If people tell me my Peterson is pretty good, and I always tell them my Peterson is Lawrence Fox's Peterson.
Well, that's what Robert Altman said to me so back in the days when I was allowed to do acting and I wasn't a far right extremist. Robert Altman said to me, and if I bored you with this story before, please forgive me, that he said the only person who's ever played a convincing policeman was the first person who ever played a policeman, because they will have had to have gone and watched a policeman. So everyone else, to some extent or another, however much work they've done, is doing an impression of an impression.
Well, and now they're doing impressions of impressions of impressions of impressions. The regress is a very long regress. But at least in my case, my Peterson is only once removed.
It is. You're my Jordan Peterson once removed. You're my first.
It's only once removed. And I have to say this, knowing so little as I do about acting, I'd never heard of Robert Altman until you told me a story that he had to say something about your shoes, I think is what it was. And I was flipping around on Netflix or something, or Amazon or something recently, and I came across this old movie that was, I don't even remember the name of it, The Long Goodbye or something like that.
It's a strange movie. It's a kind of amazing movie, but it's very strange.
It's what's his name, Elliot Gould.
Yeah, when he was allowed to act straight. Yeah, when he was allowed to play straight rather than what he does in Friends.
Well, I noticed, I haven't seen it yet, but I saw the description, and the description says Elliot Gould or something is brilliant in the hands of Robert Altman, and I was like, hey, I've heard of that guy.
He was a pretty amazing dude. He
Still alive?
No, he died. He lied when he made Gosford Park. He'd had a heart transplant and lied. So he didn't tell anyone. Well, I mean, some people knew, but none of the money people knew that he'd had a heart transplant. So he was very unwell, and he had a big chair and he would lie down. But he was very, very much of the left, and very, very much of the kind of people that you used to be able to have a normal conversation with. And I did. We became very good friends. He sort of took me under his wing, and we would go and watch movies together, and it was lovely. And we disagreed about stuff, and it was exciting. What happened to those days? They've gone. The internet. That's what happened to those days. You've got to have all of the views. This is why this is worth watching. And I want us to put it in the show notes, actually, so that people can watch it. Because let me just say it quickly out loud so everyone can know. It's so good. I can't tell you how good it is. This man. Oh, come on, brain. Yes, Charlie Munger. And he basically predicted what would happen. So he's trying to break down the human condition, and he predicted what would happen with the internet, and he got it so right. He comes up with these amazing expressions, which I love, which is the deprival superreaction syndrome and the bias from liking syndrome. And it's just brilliant stuff about saying, if people don't agree with you, why they don't agree with you, what it does to you if they don't agree with you, what effect it's going to have on you if they don't agree with you. And then he's tying it into a lot of other things of situations where, profit mattered rather than ideology, in terms of stuff like Disney and stuff like this, where they don't really care about profit. They just care about ideology. And he's talking as a businessman who wanted to make money. And he's trying to rationalize why people make terrible decisions in life. And it's so, so good from a secular perspective to listen to.
Speaking of which, speaking of terrible decisions, and I know we're just kind of babbling right here and haven't talked about anything particularly important yet, but I have to mention this. Have you ever heard of, I know you're in Britain, and so there are aspects of our popular culture that wouldn't necessarily penetrate your consciousness. But are you familiar with who Bill Belichick is?
No, maybe. It rings a bell.
Bill Belichick was the longtime coach of the New England Patriots. His quarterback was Tom Brady. He led them to 6 Super Bowl victories. And he did an interview. You would be fascinated by the dynamic of this. He did an interview with CBS Sunday Morning, which is generally sort of a feel-good sort of show. It's not the hard-hitting journalism. It's mostly fluff pieces, feel-good stuff. And Belichick is 73, and he divorced his wife of 30 years some time ago, not recently, but 15, 20 years ago. And he now is dating a 24-year-old, a 24-year-old. And you can already tell where this is going. But this is what's fascinating to me. And I just can't get enough of it because of the dynamic here. Bill Belichick, I don't know what the British equivalent would be, but Belichick has always had the reputation as being a guy who in interviews, he gives one word answers.
Yeah.
Coach, how did you feel about no? Yes.
Yeah, Alec Ferguson, Sir Alec Ferguson would be our
he's famously hates press conferences, famously kind of more or less hates humanity. There's no messing about in his locker room. He gets rid of players very quickly who think that they're bigger than the team, or who are all into themselves. If anything that disrupts the Bill Belichick locker room or system, those people are gone. And now here he is in this interview, Bill Belichick, a guy who publicly has zero personality, is like the definition of toxic masculinity, and all this kind of stuff. And here he is in this interview, and his girlfriend is sitting off, and she's a beautiful young lady. She was a cheerleader like last year, in college. And she's sitting off camera, and during the interview with him, which is, again, supposed to be a fluff piece about his new book about coaching football. Mm. And so the interviewer says to him, so, Coach, it's really delightful to be here with you. And, we're seeing a side of you today that we don't normally see. I mean, you seem very happy. Your girlfriend who's sitting off stage over here. How did the two of you meet? And then she says,
how did you guys meet?
Not talking about this.
No?
No.
I sent to Lozza, I sent him this video, this clip of Belichick in this CBS Morning interview with his girlfriend. What do you make of this dynamic?
It looks like, to me, I mean, I don't want to be cynical, because I believe that men in their 70s should have girlfriends who are 24. I think it's entirely appropriate. I mean, I think it's like a bit of a reap what you sow type moment there. He's obviously walked himself into something that he has that girl will not be coached, put it that way. She is like, I'll do this with you, Bill, but this is going to work one way. I'm the boss. Okay, honey, can I see your Yes, Bill, you can. If you're a good boy. Okay. Well, what do I need to do? Could I see your ankles? They're so much nicer than my wife's ankles, which had like varicose veins on them. Yeah, you can see my ankles, Bill. You going to be a good boy, Bill? I will. I'll do whatever you say. Everything. Samson, Delilah, bit of a Jezebel. Oof. No, he is Samson and she's Delilah, isn't it?
It's fascinating to me, because the narrative, and this is changing, but the cultural narrative has been, especially through Me Too, was that women have no agency, right? Huh. They have no agency. They just do what they do because they're the victims of powerful men. And biblically speaking, I'm kind of fascinated by the fact that God has created men and women very differently. Men are, in spite of what the culture would tell us, men are physically twice as strong on average as the average woman. They have a third more lung capacity. They have physical strength. But God has created women in such a way that they exercise power differently, not physically, but via influence. And that can be a very wicked and pernicious influence. You just referenced Jezebel. She has a very wicked influence over her husband. Or it could be, say, like Esther, who has a great deal of influence with her husband, Xerxes, the king. And so it can be positive, it can be negative. And yet here you see a man whose reputation is such no nonsense, a guy who tolerated, the kind of thing that he's doing is the very thing that he would have kicked a player off his team after an interview like this. He would have just been like, don't need that distraction, don't want it. And Tom Brady, who's referred to as one of the greatest, if not the greatest quarterbacks of all time, could not change Bill Belichick. In fact, he had his own trainer that he wanted to bring along into the locker room and to games. And Belichick said, nope, not having it. If he's not part of the team, he can't be here. And now this woman, according to the University of North Carolina, where Belichick is now the coach, he has instructed all staff to copy her on all internal emails. She is on the sideline at practices, and she's dressed like a Barbie doll. And Belichick is, I feel sorry for him because he's become a laughing stock.
Yeah,
Just quite suddenly. But it's astonishing to me that Tom Brady could not change Belichick even a little bit. And this chick in 6 months has him on a lead. And it is, you're quite right. It is sexual power that she is asserting over him.
Yeah, Bill does. But we all have our weaknesses, don't we? That's the nature of life. And it turns out that Bill's is for 24-year-old control freaks, narcissistic control freaks. But it's such a shame, isn't it? Because I mean, it's funny, but it's not funny because I feel sorry for Mrs. Belichick, the former Mrs. Belichick. That's no good. But I also don't feel too sorry for her because she must be laughing her pants off watching her husband make such a fool of himself. But we now have this fourth epoch of life. We do. The standard model of get up, go to school, get beaten until you obey, then go to work and be beaten until you obey at work, and then retire and die on the golf course from a heart attack. That model of life is finished now. We've got the fourth epoch where people live to much longer ages who are obviously still, without wishing to put too coarse a tone on it, sexually functional. And Bill's obviously being caught between the third and the fourth epoch of his life. So he could have gone on to, as you say, right, he's written the book, but he could have gone on to mentor the next generation of coaches and establish the Belichick model and, be famous for that for the rest of his life, and his legacy could have been that. But his legacy now is going to be a very embarrassed man, because at the end of the day, no one is going to look at that and say this is an emotional connection of anything other than power. So it's only an emotional connection that's based on sexual attraction.
It's transactional, isn't it? She wants his money, presumably, and the stage he can offer her. And it's quite obvious. And by the way, the Oxford comma tweet, it is the woman in the picture is her blown up, glaring in the interview. So I screenshot that because she's glaring at Belichick, telling him, "Don't you say that." And that's who that is. It's not actually my editor in that photo. No. It's her. So Americans who've seen that interview will know, who that is there. A personal question. Have you ever been in a relationship like this?
With a very young person?
Well, not necessarily the age gap thing, but I mean, I know you're way older than Lizzie, but what is Lizzie? Is Lizzie 16 now?
She's just turned 16, yeah. So
have you been in a relationship, not in terms of age, but with a person like this who controlled you like this?
Yeah, several. Yeah. Several. It's difficult. I mean, obviously, if you're looking for, there's in the broad demographic of psychopathic female narcissists, they're spread all over the spot in life, but they're just in show business. There's a very, 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 very high concentration of them. And I really have. And they can do untold damage, as Bill's face is revealing in that interview.
So you have at one time in your life been the Prince Harry to someone else's.
Oh, did you see what she said to Prince Harry? That vixen. She said in an interview, she's decided, Meghan, whatever her face is, she's like, he loves me so much. And I'm like, And it was Lizzie that pointed it out to me this morning because, we were having a little doom scroll as we are before we get up and go and get on with our days. And Lizzie turned around and went, that is, because Lizzie's obviously, she picks this stuff up very quickly. She went, that is the sign of a very, very dangerous woman. She doesn't say, I love him so much. She says, he loves me so much. So even the most sacred thing in the world, love, she makes about herself. And the majority of my in relationship experience has been dealing with someone very similar to that. Yeah. So, but as my father quite rightly pointed out, he's like, you chose her, you married her, So I think one has to take one's own sense of responsibility for that and not be resentful for the fact that you reap what you sow. But the sad thing is that epochal shift, which is going, how quickly you can destroy your own credibility, like in one interview as well, which is amazing. To be able to go from like this hard-nosed guy who wouldn't let Tom Brady bring in and call the shots, which is quite right in a sports team, to go, I want to feel young again. I want to feel valued again. I want to feel sexy again in some way. And you just go, wow, that's such a strange thing after all you've achieved to become a laughingstock over a weekend. But that is the modern world, I suppose. Who encouraged him to do the interview? She's like, they need to see the softer side of you, Bill. If they don't see the softer side of you, you're not going to see the softer side of me. It's like, okay.
Well, she says that she is now his media manager.
Oh, great.
And
she's
so
doing a terrible
presumably
job.
he did the interview because she wanted him to do the interview, because there's some talk of the full interview being revealed, like the outtakes or whatever you would call them. But apparently she got up and stormed out at one point and interrupted on several occasions. But for me, it's really less about Belichick and her. I mean, they're just pop culture noise. It's the dynamic. It's the negative dynamic of between a man and a woman, and the power, the sexual power that can be exerted. And we've made reference to prior relationships, and Lizzie is exactly the opposite of that. She exerts influence in your life, but she exerts it in a very positive way, in a very good way, because she does love you, and she wants what is best for you. Versus the Meghan Markle, I think this woman's name is Jordan Hudson, a kind of influence which is quite pernicious and is very self-serving.
Can I ask you? I want to ask you a question. So, and I want to relate it to Christians, right? So, sorry to interrupt as well, by the way.
Go ahead.
But it came into my head. There seems to me to be something about some Christians, which is they want to express a sense of solidarity, for want of a better word, with whatever you're experiencing or someone else is experiencing. And the hyper extended version of that is this lunatic woman saying, I've got to control everything. And if I can't control everything, then I can't control myself and everything is messed up. But I've noticed, like, when people express, and it tends to be Christians rather than just average people. And Lizzie is a Christian, but she doesn't do this at all. Is that when someone sends you a message of, I'm behind you, because obviously my life is, and your life has lots of things in it where you actually kind of need people to get behind you. I tend to notice this thing where someone will say, I've seen what's going on. I really, 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 really with you. I'm praying for you. I really care about you. Then there's a middle sentence which says you were kind of asking for it and you offered them an own goal, but nevertheless, I'm really, really behind you. And I wonder, and I had it today. I had a conversation with a guy today about this. because we're making this documentary. Well, we finished making this documentary, and we're talking about how we're going to release it. It's a really, really good documentary about a girl. It's very, very sad, about a girl who took her own life after being sexually assaulted. It's sort of the real life version of this TV show Adolescence, which has been going around. And he took time out of our conversation about, and he's a Christian. He took time out of our conversation about what I wanted to do in regards to the documentary, what my plan was, to start lecturing me about how I should behave, whilst at the same time saying how much he felt for my plight. Do you know what I mean? Do you notice that? This sort of sense of, I think it's kind of what Jordan Peterson was trying to say on Joe Rogan, which is like, where are the limits on the other side? Because there was this, he didn't need to, he said he overgunned himself by saying, it's not just me that thinks it, everyone thinks it. And I went, well, surely you can't speak for everyone, can you? And he went, okay, no, I'm just speaking for me and like people I know. And I said, okay. And Lizzie said to me, she said, don't respond at all to a personal, it's not an attack, because it wasn't an attack, but it was some sort of sense that comes from a lot of Christians, and I only ever really notice it in Christians or leftists, weirdly, which is this thing of going, I really feel for you, but if only you were a better person every day of the week, it wouldn't happen to you. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I'm processing. I know exactly what you're talking about. I was thinking as you were talking, when I have experienced that, is that more from Christians than from other people. I probably wouldn't say that it is, but I don't know. Maybe that's been your experience. I will say this. I think that it's often alleged that what you're talking about is kind of an element of self-righteousness. Is that fair?
Yeah.
And it's often alleged that Christians are self-righteous, or that somehow that self-righteousness is a product of religious, specifically Christian belief. And I always push back on that and say no. Self-righteousness, legalism, which is what that is a product of human nature. I mean, some of the most self-righteous people I've ever met were not Christians at all. They were adherents to some kind of secular ideology, like wearing masks or recycling or saving the planet or wokedom. Or I mean, the woke crowd is the most self-righteous element there is. That said, there is something within us, I think, that I've experienced. I've experienced what you're talking about regarding things like, for instance, my recent swatting. The police showing up at my house, and there are people. It disappoints me, and I think this is what you're talking about. It disappoints me when there are those who don't. I haven't had anyone say it as directly as that, what you just said, but where it's sort of implied that I brought it on myself. And I think that what you're hearing in that, Lauren, at least my response to that, because knowing your life and knowing the position that you take and so forth, is I don't think that at all where you're concerned. I go, no, this is because you've shown courage. You've stood up for your convictions. You've stood up for people who are real victims of real crimes. That's what this documentary, is about. And I think people say that to you, or maybe say that to me, because they want to have the excuse of not standing up. This didn't happen to me, Lawrence, because I don't go out there and say stupid things like you. That's what's implied in that. And I didn't get swatted because I wasn't out there saying provocative things on social media or on your podcast or in interviews or in your books or articles the way you do. I'm a better Christian than you. I think that's what's being asserted in that.
Which I find super disappointing, because if the thing that we really don't like is hypocrisy, and the thing that's worth, in order to encourage a sort of free speech based debate, you have to, everyone has to already know their own blind spots, which is we're all hypocrites. Like, it's sort of kind of page one of her conversation.
Yeah.
You know, the Christian way of looking at it would be to say we're all sinners. So therefore, it's not my job to judge you. It's not my job to even comment on you. I will leave that to God. You know, and if you don't want to ascribe to my way of doing things, then fair enough. I can pick or choose whether I want to be involved in your life. But it's the people that involve themselves in your life. I'm going to give you an example because this is a really good example of it. And this is from someone completely different. Hey, I heard about the impending prosecution. I'm really sorry you have to go through this new hardship. Whilst it was a wide open goal for the powers that be, it seems like very much a political persecution, which is abhorrent. You're in our prayers. I'm like, I didn't need the middle sentence, dude. Why did you need to send me the middle sentence? I know it was an open goal. You're assuming
An open what?
An open goal. It's an English expression for saying that you can't miss.
Oh, gotcha.
So, but I keep trying to explain to people that, and they think, these two particular individuals who I had to encounter, actually three today, keep saying to me the same thing, which is, and so I've started to question myself as to whether I'm right. They're like, well, not right, but whether they are right, because of people. I listen to people and I care about what they think. I was thinking to myself, but you don't really understand what I'm trying to achieve. My madness, the method, it is my madness, if you know what I mean. It's like I'm deliberately going after them to let them know that I know what they're up to and I'm not frightened of them. And you do that in a way which is, in my way, is not to. I don't do sort of major rationalism with people that are bad actors. I just go, I know your game, mate. I know what you're up to, so I go after them. And three people have said to me today, they were like, well, yeah, no, I'm really with you. That's one from my heart, my prayers, my thoughts, which I'm sure they are. But it's the middle sentence. It's the qualifier, which is like, if only you'd listened to me, I could have told you how to do this better. And my response to them is, when was the last time you did anything remotely courageous to do with the stuff that we talk about in private, about how upset you are with exactly the same problems I am, and you speak all the bluster in private, but when it comes to speaking publicly, you'll say absolutely nothing, but you will criticize me for doing it the way that I do it. And I go, and he said to me, there's one of these guys who I spoke to today, he said, I can't compromise him, but anyway, he knows me really well. He says, you're doing it to yourself. So you create these problems and then you complain about them. And he said it openly. And I said, what exactly is the problem? Because this documentary that we're making, that is being made, is about the sexual abuse of a child. So he says, I feel uncomfortable about the fact that we're going to release it with your name on it because you're being in court for some ridiculous charge for some girl who shared a photo of herself 15 years ago. And I go, why are you not offering me either no words or words of understanding as to what the nature of the political persecution that this is, which is, we make a film about a girl being sexually abused, I get accused of sexual offence. I say I want to live in a colourblind world, I get accused of racism. It's like, why can't people just take that extra leap? I think is what. Anyway, I don't know why I'm talking about my sort of annoyingly bad day, but
I actually think what you're saying here is it's touching on an issue that's quite profound and very real for me, and I know very real for you, because we have both been at the center of controversies, sometimes of our own making, sometimes for simply standing up for what is right. And I deal with that, and let's see if this touches on, if you think this is relevant to what you're saying. If it isn't, then just tell me and I'll try something else. But I think the way I respond to this, Lawrence, is we're both we're both in a public position where there are a lot of people who want to offer you advice. And there's a joke here in the United States. I don't know if this applies in Britain, but where, because it's become a meme now, a lot of people don't do it anymore. But where Christians would say to one another something like this, which is it's the middle sentence. They would begin by saying, I want to tell you this in love. And the joke would be that whatever is coming next isn't love.
Yeah.
It is being couched in language that sounds very spiritual and wonderful, but what's coming next isn't that. And Christians can hide a personal agenda in spiritual language that is actually jealousy or maybe even hate. But the way I've learned to deal with that is a lot of times people, again, here will say to you, can I tell you something? And I will say, no. And that's surprising to people because they're used to, the answer being, well, yeah, sure. And my response to that is, no, you may not. I haven't solicited that. And you don't occupy that space in my life. So there are people, you're one of them. There are others, but it's a very, very small group of people that I allow to speak into my life at a personal level. I'm not talking about where they say, hey, you got the dates wrong on, when Vladimir Putin was born, or the Ukraine invasion. I'm not talking about that kind of correction, but a personal kind of a correction. I don't allow people on social media that space in my life, or people who will send me lengthy emails about all that I need to change about myself or what they don't like about me. And I think you don't even know me. And yet you're posting here on YouTube, or something else, telling me what I should or shouldn't be. I don't give them that space. There are people in my life that I do give that to because I know they love me. I know that relationship is intimate and real, that they celebrate, the successes in my life. They've been there in the failures of my life. So when they have something to say, then I tend to, yes, I want to hear it. So to come full circle, if I'm Bill Belichick, I would hope you would be privately pulling me aside and say, Larry, this is a train wreck. Yeah. What are you doing?
Well, there's something else about it.
Does it resonate?
Yeah, 100%. And I think that we all of us have agendas. It's whether you're aware of it. And then I was thinking, so while I'm doing what I do, which is like I'm very sensitive, even though people think that I'm some crazed Nazi. I'm actually quite sensitive. So I was walking around, and I was thinking about it. And I thought, and I was talking to Lizzie about it as well. And Lizzie was saying the thing is about most of these people that give you feedback is they've never done anything in their life. And they resent you for doing what you're doing. And they're actually slightly jealous of even your suffering. They're jealous of because they don't have it. They have a different kind of suffering, which is we all have, which is existential. But my feeling was, and actually I think it comes from God, I could be wrong, is that there is only one truth. The truth is debatable, but it exists, and it is foundational. Nothing can change it. But with the fall of man, the truth became split. So there's a bunch of people, our friends that we talk about all the time on the leftists, who will split truth to serve the absolute iconography of man's lies. But that becomes their truth. And they will die for that. And people have in their millions over the years. And then there's God's truth, of which other people are willing to sacrifice everything for. But the truth remains the same, and it's split down the way that people think. And I've come to the conclusion that actually all of the influence in the world is defined by those two groups. Those that seek those that seek to enforce man's lies and will die for that mission, and those that speak to defend God's truth and will also die for that mission. And I think I've probably met in my entire life less than 10 people on either side who really genuinely are in that battle. And
Well,
I just think you know when I say met, I mean no. So I'm sure there are millions of them across the world, but really, like, once you've dug under the layers of somebody, or they've dug under the layers of you, to find out that where people's thing stops, and one of the places it stops is this idea that people know better than you what you should be, because actually it's very clear, the Bible is very clear, that the only way to heaven is via him, not via your mate.
well, you're touching on a verse. You're speaking a truth here, a verse that every now and then it kind of circles back around to me, that it's there, that this truth is there, and it's a terrifying truth, actually. And I think it's in Proverbs 14, and it is this: there is a way that seems right to a man, but it only brings him death. There is a way that seems right. So our capacity for self-deception is extraordinary.
Yeah.
Jeremiah 17:9 puts it this way: it says, the heart is deceitful and desperately wicked above all things. Who can know it? So our ability, I think we do it in very small ways. We say, well, the camera, adds 10 pounds, I mean,
Yeah.
we deceive ourselves. I don't actually look like that. Or, we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. We can deceive ourselves in small ways, but what that verse is getting to, again, there is a way that seems right to a man, but it only brings him death, or it's the way of death, as some translations put it. Is that verse is saying it is possible to deceive yourself into believing that something is the truth, only to discover on Judgment Day that you have anchored your whole life into that which is false and has led you straight to hell. I mean, that's terrifying, and that reminds me that I come back to another truth, what you're talking about. To me, the most politically incorrect statement in all of Scripture is, in I think it's in John 20, where Pilate asked Jesus, what is the truth? And Jesus says nothing, because 6 chapters earlier, he had answered the question, and he said, I am the truth. I mean, that's an extraordinary remark. I'm the truth. I define truth. I'm truth with a capital T. Everyone and everything must measure from that fixed point. And so for me, this idea that I have to constantly recalibrate, because we can all start down paths and think something is true and aren't. And in Hannah Arendt, the German philosopher, she's not a Christian, she's an atheist actually, but a very interesting woman. And her book, Eichmann in Jerusalem, a report on the banality of evil, she covered for the New Yorker. She covered the Eichmann trial in Jerusalem. The guy who never, he wasn't particularly anti-Semitic. He was 33 when he joined the Nazi Party, so he wasn't a member of the Hitler Youth. He'd never read Mein Kampf. He never actually killed anybody. He just made the trains run on time to Auschwitz and Buchenwald and Mauthausen and so forth. And the controversial conclusion to that book was that she said, all the judges and all of humanity wanted to believe that Eichmann was some kind of monster. And she said, and 3 psychiatrists evaluated him and said he was perfectly normal. And she says the terrifying reality of this trial was the knowledge that we all have the capacity to commit such extraordinary evil. And that book ends with her talking about his execution and his banal remarks. What are any last words? And he says, long live Argentina. And then, and breaks his neck, and hanging. His life had been reduced to this truth for him that is the way of death. It's It's just all a big bunch of nothing. And how important it is that our lives be animated by real truth as opposed to that which is false. And
well, the closest approximation that someone can come to the real truth is to not judge another in their journey towards the truth. The only way you can discover the truth is by speaking it as much as possible, and that's also to say that you are going to speak things that may be true but may be wrong. You may have expressed things in a way that on reflection, you don't think are right, but you can't move forward without a commitment to the fact that there is a truth. And a lot of people
there has to be some judgment on the way, doesn't there? I mean, again,
well, I judge ideas and not people if I can. I try very, very hard not to judge people. Like it's this whole sort of ridiculous idea of the fact that just because I think Islam is a death cult that I suddenly hate Muslims. I don't. I like Muslims. They're fine. You're a Muslim. Good. Go for it. Eat your heart out. I don't care. But I love you as a person. Your ideology, I can't bear. On any level, I can't bear it. But that doesn't mean that I don't think that you're God's creation and that you are a wonderful and special and unique human being. I just think you're wrong about...
You were probably in it, for all I know. But I have been subjected to every Jane Austen movie that has ever been made.
Yeah.
I have a wife and a daughter, and these things would be on in the back. But I will never forget what's her name, Gwyneth Paltrow movie, Emma, and sitting through that whole film. And there's a scene in it that I think is brilliant. And it's a scene where Emma is scoring points. She is mocking a spinster who is a friend of hers and who's good to her. You probably know the scene very well. And she humiliates this woman before a group of people. And then as she's walking away, Mr. Knightley comes to her and he says, "Badly done, Emma, badly done." And Emma starts to cry and he says, it hit, I don't remember the exact words, but it's a powerful scene. He says to her, I take no pleasure in saying this to you, but I say it to you because I love you. And this is a woman who has adored you her whole life. She will never equal you in beauty or in station in life. And you had the opportunity to elevate her, and you instead humiliated her just to score a few points. I reference that because there's judgment in that, but it's the judgment of someone who has proximity to your life, where there's intimacy that exists, and who you allow to speak into your life.
And it's not the judgment of it. It wasn't the judgment
maybe
of
judgment's the wrong word.
It's not the judgment of a person. It's the judgment of an action.
Gotcha.
And that's the thing which we seem to have forgotten, I suppose. That's the bit. It's like, if you love someone, you can tell them that they're doing something badly, and you have that right to do it. Hence the middle sentence. You do have the right to do it.
Yeah.
But also, there is the way of turning around. You wouldn't turn around to the spinster. So what I sense from these middle sentences that you get from the, "Can I tell you something from Christ?" or "From my loving Christ," or whatever, is like they know they are Emma in that situation, right? Because you're the one, their station in life is secure, very secure. You're the one whose station in life is less secure by your own doings or by none. Your station is less secure. So they're behaving as Emma behaved to the spinster, because the spinster is the person who has no station there. And therefore, when you have the power within your soul and your love and your forgiveness and your understanding to someone to say, "I get it," then do. But when someone overreaches, people seem to, in the modern world, the internet world, and all the stuff that you and I, this thing that we were talking about earlier about dragging it on, we bring it on ourselves by saying controversial things. It's like, well, yeah, but are we saying controversial things to elevate ourselves? Is it to get more, to bring more attention to ourselves? Or are we saying these things because they're important things to be said because no one else will say them, and that we're happy to deal with the consequences of saying them? Or we're willing to bear the burden of saying them? That's the difference for me. The difference for me is, I'm very happy for someone who's been through hell to give me shit. What I'm not happy to do is listen to someone who won't go through hell, who's not ready to do it for whatever reason, then lecture me about how I go through hell. That's where I sit with it.
Yeah, and I agree with that. And there are plenty. Listen, there are plenty of those kind of people. What comes to mind is a little story. When I was 18, I worked in a tire store. So I'm jacking up cars all day long, changing tires. The boss is out. The boss is also he's the owner of the store, but he's also the salesman. So upstairs is where you would walk in and you choose your tires. They would sell them to you, and then they would send them down to me, and I would put them on your car. And I knew the boss was out, and I could hear someone come through the door because the buzzer goes off. So I go upstairs, and there's nobody around, no salesperson around. So I sell somebody 4 tires. I'm quite pleased with myself because, I've sold somebody some tires. And then I meet them in the garage and I mount them all. I get them all mounted and send the guy off. Well, then the boss comes back and he says, please tell me you didn't sell these tires for this amount. And I said, yes, sir, I did. And he called all the staff together. And he said, when I was gone, Larry sold a set of 4 brand new tires for half their actual value. So we lost money on that sale. And so the other guys are kind of sniggering. And he says, but I commend him because he took the bull by the horns and he did something. The question I have is, where were you for? You guys are in charge here when I'm gone. Why was he left, to do this? And I have reflected on that story many times in my life because here was a boss who was commending me while telling me, hey, don't do it like that again.
Yeah.
I'm grateful that you were seeking to get something done. You took the bull by the horns, use his phrase, and you acted.
He's great.
He's been in that position because others were twiddling their thumbs.
That's grace. That's what grace is, to teach someone something without humiliating them.
But how much are other people? What you're talking about here is there are other people who risk nothing. So they're never going to have the public failure. They're never going to be dragged into court. They're never going to humiliate themselves in a debate or whatever because they don't risk anything. And then there's going out into public, which involves risk, which means getting bruised, which means public failures, which means success, which means people who love you and people who want you dead. It's all of that. And the group that's over here, they're the ones who are quick to tell you, this is how you should have said that. This is what you should have. I'll never forget after I debated Christopher Hitchens, actually. And Christopher was, Oxford Union, very famous for his debates. And as soon as I came off stage, I recall somebody telling me what I should have said. And by all accounts, I performed very well in that debate. And Christopher himself would say later that I won that debate. He was very, very gracious in that regard. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I remember saying to this person, Jeopardy, which is a TV show in America, I said, Jeopardy is always easier at home on the couch. It's a little different when you're on stage and someone asks a question like, so Larry, where was God in the Holocaust? And I have 60 seconds to respond to that question. Sitting out in the audience, you may have a brilliant answer, but it's very different when you're on stage and you were on TV show Question Time, so you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I think that's true. A priest friend of mine described it when I sort of didn't complain, but I pointed this phenomena, which seems to be common, to him. He said, well, it's kind of like a sports stadium, and everyone in the crowd knows what the manager should do, what the coach should do. And they're all screaming at the coach, like, put him on the left wing, do that, do this. But the coach is the one that has to make the decisions, and people have different styles and different approaches and different ways. I just wish that there was, not wish, it's the wrong word. I sort of just say to myself, put yourself in it for a minute and know what it is to try and live in the middle of a tornado of your. You could say it's of my own making, so you can blame me for making the tornado, but not necessarily. What I did was I went tornado hunting and I found a tornado. It's like blaming the guy who goes tornado hunting, finding the tornado for dying in the tornado. It's like, okay, well, he was trying to film the tornado and learn more about tornadoes and show you what tornadoes look like. And I suppose that's sort of roughly where we're at with it. But I've got to.
Have you ever seen the film We Were Soldiers?
Yes, with Mel.
Do you remember the scene where Sam Elliott stands over the photographer and he says, "You ain't going to get any pictures down there, Sonny"?
I love that film. And it's a great film, isn't it?
Yeah,
Mel did so much for cinema with that film and with Hacksaw Ridge as well, to try and put the divine in the just the devil. It was incredible.
Well, I know
stuff.
you haven't seen it, but I thought it was brilliant. I thought you were brilliant in The Professor of the Madman. It honestly is probably one of my top 10 favorite movies because it's a film about grace. Sometime we have to watch it. I want to watch it with you when you see it for the first time, even though you're in it. And anybody who's listening to us should go and watch that film because it really is superb. I've read the book, and the book is quite good. It's based on a true story. I tell you a funny little local story. Soccer's not huge in this country, but a local high school coach, soccer coach, he had enough of the parents telling him how to do things. And so he had a meeting with the parents and he told them, "You guys choose your own coach and put together your own team and you'll play my team." And so they did on like a Saturday afternoon. And of course, the high school kids just demolished the parents. And it was a lot of backslapping and laughs. And it took what was otherwise a very tense kind of situation, and it was a reality check for parents. And at the end, he said, "I think we can see your team isn't very good, and maybe you'll just leave me alone."
But then again, graceful. You did it in a graceful way, and that's
It was clever.
I wouldn't mind if someone came up to me and said, "You're very easily provoked." And I would go, "Yes, I am. That's true."
I don't think you're easily provoked.
I'm pretty easily provoked. I am, and it is a weakness. But it's fine. We all have weaknesses. But I wouldn't mind if someone said that to me, rather than someone saying to me, "You did that really badly."
Well, you have coined a phrase on today's show that I think is a very good one. The middle sentence.
Yeah.
And I hope I'm not guilty of sending you middle sentences. I believe in being pretty direct with friends.
You are. You're very direct with me, and that's why I love you. Because also, as Lizzie quite rightly pointed out, when I was complaining about it to her, she went, "At least he gives us enough of a shit about you to tell you how he feels."
Well, the only thing I argue about with you is just because I want to be on time, and you're like herding cats. But that said, I can't stand it. Well, there's a friend of mine, a good friend, but I often say to him, "This drives me nuts about you. You will have." It took me years to figure this out about him. He's passive aggressive. And he will often say, "That's a great idea." And I had to learn that when he says it's a great idea, it means he hates the idea. So you would be moving forward with something that you think he's on board with, only to discover that he hated it. And I just said, "Look, why don't you just tell me my idea sucks?" Rather than saying, "That's a great idea." And I just prefer to know where I stand. And if there's something that I've done to make somebody mad, don't just go silent on me or become passive aggressive. Tell me what I've done so that either A, I can repent of it and I can ask your forgiveness for it, or I can give reasonable explanation. I can go, "You know what? You misread that. That wasn't what I meant at all." And to me, that's just the way guys should operate with each other. Women, it's different, but women, we're willing to put up with it as men because there are benefits when it comes to women. I don't want to put up with it. I want to put up with it from a guy, but from my wife, I do.
Yeah, wives are much more squidgy than guys, and it's appropriate to cuddle them.
But I hope I'm not guilty of the middle sentence.
No, you're not. You're trying to put a bit of learning into it and go, and I feel a bit raw because I'm like, I got 2 more charges that they've now thrown at me. One of these charges, I mean, if you want to know how insane Britain is going,
are you allowed to discuss this stuff? Like,
I can't discuss the one that's ongoing, but I can read you the charge so that people know how unbelievably crazy.
I don't want people getting off of here without clarity about what this is.
So, hang on a minute. Well, the first charge is that a woman who was a celebrity back in the day celebrities back in the day, they used to do deals with paparazzos, and they used to take actually, I can't talk about that. I can't talk about it because it's not. But what I can read to you is these 2 new charges.
Okay.
All I can say about the first charge is it's a complete load of utter bollocks. And it has nothing to do with anything other than the deliberate persecution of me. Even people who are my enemies know that. But this is the scarier one. Between the 12th of the 9th, 2023, did acts, namely posted on social media, posted several messages on the social media formerly known as Twitter, which was capable of encouraging the commission of an either-way offence.
Of a what offence?
An either-way offence is an offence you can try in a Crown Court or a Magistrates Court. I will obviously go to a Crown Court for it because I don't trust anyone in the judiciary. But it's very interesting. It said, you've said something that could have made someone do something. That's what they're charging me with.
Well, let me say this on your behalf that I think might be helpful to our audience here. We've started with very trivial things, and we've moved into territory that's quite heavy here. But I've said this to Lawrence privately, and it bears repeating publicly. When you are a public figure and you're being attacked, and in this case, being attacked because you're a public figure who is taking a stand against a very woke government in its agenda. That is Keir Starmer's government, mass immigration, gangs, speaking out against all those kinds of things. When the government has targeted you and decided to destroy you, it can come in a variety of ways. And after I was swatted, Lawrence and I were talking on the phone, and at the same time, he was getting these kinds of charges. And I was saying to him this, and this is worth putting out there for our audience to process. There's a kind of persecution, and Lawrence is being persecuted. I've been persecuted. There's a kind of persecution that has a certain kind of public honor to it. So in my case, what happened to me at USAID in Cairo, if you survive a government accusing you of terrorism and espionage, it has a certain kind of badass quality to it that has a certain honor to it. When people send, heavily armed men to your home and, in the hope that you're murdered, if you survive that has a certain kind of badass quality and an honor to it. What is happening to Lawrence is it doesn't have the public honor to it. It does with God, because God knows the reality here. And we, at the end of the day, we're all performing for an audience of one when it comes right down to it. But what I find particularly evil about what is being done to Lawrence here is because it's not a frontal attack the way swatting is, or my standoff with the Egyptian secret police was. It's not like that. It's a very devious attack that's meant to make even your supporters go, boy, I'm not sure I want to like that tweet, or I want to retweet him, or I want to be seen with him publicly. I'm going to send the middle sentence so that if my association is known publicly, I can screenshot that and say, well, I did chastise him for his behavior. That's what this is about. So you need to be aware, if you're someone who takes a public stand, that there might be an effort to say, I mean, this is what they've tried to do with Donald Trump and others, is to suggest Epstein Island and this kind of stuff, to deny him the persecuted status, that he trying to shoot him in the head. He survived it, and it was a badass photo, and it probably won him the election. Trying to say that he's a rapist or something, that's meant to deny him any kind of honor in his persecution. I don't know if I'm saying this particularly well.
No, you've got it exactly right.
And this is what's happening to Lawrence here.
Yeah, it's exactly what's happening. And I was just thinking, which is not a good thought, I was thinking, I really hope someone shoots at me and just hits my ear. And then I think that I can
come here, I'll do it for you.
Yeah. Oh, I got shot. I got spotted by Larry. That's not kind of the version you want. Anyway, I've got to run, man. I've got to go and feed.
Well, it's been a good conversation. I have enjoyed it. Praying for you. Praying for you. Looking forward to having you here. I hope you get some good rest. And
I will. I want to come and see you before we get married. I want to turn off because when we next talk, I'll talk you through. It's too long to talk to you through now, but I will talk you through how the state tried to ruin our wedding day and lost. But you think of little persecutions, and big persecutions, they literally tried to destroy our wedding day.
Well, see, this is what I'm talking about. And I'm sure there will someone, I'll send you a middle sentence text right now that says, hey, I'm praying for you about that, but it's really kind of your fault.
Yeah, you deserve it. Anyway, we'll call this episode The Middle Sentences.
Yeah, no, that's good. I like the phrase.
Yeah.
I like the phrase. It's the passive aggressive middle sentence, but this has been a very good discussion, one I've certainly enjoyed, and look forward to seeing you soon.
I love it, and let's get back to normal now, please, because I miss our conversations. I know we have normal conversations on the phone, but it's quite nice to have the conversations about these bigger things where people can feel that they're included in it, which they are. So thank you all for watching this episode of WTF Happened to Lawrence Fox's Hair, the Middle Sentences edition. It's me, Lawrence Fox, and him, Larry Taunton, and we are going to probably call each other in about 20 minutes and have another hour conversation. Anyway, love to Laurie, love to Judith, love to your family, and God bless you.
And to you and yours as well. Take care.
All right, bro.